Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Now the fun starts for this Nebraska program. The last couple of weeks, you've seen players leave this Nebraska program. We said it start picking up, and it starts picking up in a massive way. Former five-star defensive lineman Williams Nwaneri committing to Nebraska out of the transfer portal. This kid's fascinating. He is truly a one of one in terms of the physical traits that he brings to the table. And I think a really interesting storyline for Nebraska here is we kind of knew he'd probably need a year to grow into that frame. I mean, he's got big hands, long arms, a massive frame, and probably needed a year before he was ready to play at the collegiate level. Well, he got that development year on Missouri's dime, and now he's coming over to Nebraska. And it's hard to not see this kid getting on the football field early for Nebraska in 2025. And if you are newly minted defensive line coach Terry Braden, this is your guy. Like, if you are a defensive line coach, you dream about coaching kids like Williams with the physical traits that he brings to the table. Going back to his high school days, what always stood out to me is one, just the incredible frame and length that he had. And you always said when he figures out how to use that length and how to use those big hands, he's going to be very, very difficult for offensive linemen to deal with. That's kind of what you're hoping to see from him on the 2025 football field. And it kind of goes along with, how Matt Rhule wants to build this program. And that is betting on the superior athletes will make them good football players. It doesn't get more athletic and more freaky than Williams Nwaneri. Excited to get into kind of talk about what he brings to Nebraska and then talk about where Nebraska is going in the transfer portal after this. Before we get into it, as always, to the Nebraska fans, I think it's going to be a really fun next couple of weeks. And a lot of y'all have been showing a ton of support going back to 12 months ago when we were breaking down the transfer portal commitments. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into this one now. Did not play a ton of football for Missouri in the 2024 season. I think that was, kind of expected. He was more of a guy that was a five-star prospect, top 10 prospect in the country, a lot more because what he could be as a college football player than what he was. He kind of got that developmental year at Missouri. Now he comes over to Nebraska, and this is, I think, why it's such a big commitment is one, this kid is super talented. I mean, has every capability in the world to being an all-conference guy in the defensive line. But I think more importantly, this was a position that I think is one of the bigger concerns or target groups for Matt Rhule in this Nebraska program. You had guys like James Williams, Jamari Butler, Prince Will U transfer out, losing guys like Ty Robinson and Nash. There was a lot of space to add guys on this defensive line. And more importantly, you wanted depth. We talked about this pretty much all of 2024. Didn't seem like Nebraska was deep enough on the defensive line. Guys like Ty Robinson and Nash were forced to play a lot of football for Nebraska over the last 2 years. You want to start building that defensive line depth up. You want to keep rotating these guys in and out. Williams Nwaneri not only providing depth, but he's providing a guy that could give you an All-American ceiling. Now, what fascinates me most about Williams Nwaneri is, one, he looks a bit more filled out than what he was as a high school kid. He's probably still growing into he's got a really unique frame at almost 6'7", 260 pounds. Now that he's had a year under his belt at the collegiate ranks, I think what you're most excited about is seeing what he can do for Nebraska in 2025. I also think he gives you some versatility. He's a guy that probably will play the edge majority of the time. But when you get into those third and long passing situations, you could probably cook him in to the inside at that three tech and have him rush from the inside. And that length and twitch and athleticism is going to be a lot to deal with. That's one thing I probably should mention is not only the length, huge hands, he's got some really good burst off the line of scrimmage. So when you have the length and then you have a good, strong get off as well, it's really difficult for offensive linemen to deal with you, especially guys on the inside who might be a little bit shorter, not have as much length as the tackles you might see. So there's some versatility. There's obviously some really, really high upside. And I think it's easy to get concerned with, well, he didn't play a ton as a true freshman. I think that was the expectation for this kid coming out of high school. There's all sorts of different type of high school prospects. You see some of those guys that, he's kind of physically maxed out coming out of high school. is probably ready to play early, but maybe not quite the ceiling that some other prospects have. And then you have guys like Williams Nwaneri, who is a very gifted kid, but you kind of knew when he was committing out of his senior year that it's probably going to be year 2, year 3 for him when he starts to really turn it on. And so for 2025, 2026, I can't wait to see what this kid kind of becomes. Now, yesterday we talked about some targets that Nebraska was going after. Here's another interesting one that kind of just came on my radar. Cameron Olds from Kent State. And we know Matt Rhule, he's going to turn over every stone to find talent to fill his football program with. Cameron Olds as a pure pass rusher, I think there's some real juice here. I don't know if he's ready to play. I don't know if he's ready to play early every single down in the Big Ten, because some of that play strength I think needs to get developed a little bit more. But I look at him and say, as a pure pass rusher, I mean, he can get it going. And that's something that we've talked about for the last 2 years for Nebraska, getting a strong pass rush with your front four. It got better in 2024, but going back to 2023, it always seemed like Nebraska had to send linebackers and send safeties to manufacture pressure on the quarterback. I think one of the stronger emphases we're going to see from Nebraska going into 2025 is, hey, we don't want to have to blitz to go create negative plays and go put pressure on a quarterback. We want to be able to affect the quarterback with just our front four. Cameron Olds, although might not play a ton on first and second down in those third and long situations, I think could be a massive asset. And that means a lot when you're trying to have a really good defense. He's going to visit Saturday, from what I've been seeing. And so that's another really interesting name to keep your eye on. Massive commitment from a kid that I'm really excited to see, just as a college football fan, really excited to see what this kid can be going into his second year of college football in Williams Nwaneri. We'll pause it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.